Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. We're here to really get into your sources, pull out the key insights, the core knowledge, specifically tailored for you.
That's right. And today, we're tackling a pretty deep intersection. Physics, consciousness, and well-meaning.
Our source material is an interview with James Glattfelder, author of Sapient Cosmos. It's quite an ambitious book, apparently.
Oh, definitely. It aims to chronicle this pretty significant paradigm shift happening in physics right now and what that means for philosophy, moving beyond just physicalism.
Right, physicalism, the idea that everything's just physical stuff at the bottom.
Exactly. And the book explores these new metaphysical ideas popping up.
So the core tension we want to unpack today is that relationship between the, let's say, objective scientific view of the universe and our own subjective experience.
Gotcha.
Consciousness, right, including those, non-ordinary states people talk about.
Yeah, that's the crux of it. Glattfelder's work, based on this interview, really highlights the synthesis he's trying to build, charting how physics is reassessing things.
And the philosophical fallout, so to speak.
Precisely. He argues that physicalism, that idea of reality just being inert particles, Lego blocks,
Right.
basically, it's losing ground.
So our deep dive is about analyzing that shift, exploring that tension between the objective models and subjective life.
The whole tapestry of conscious experience. Yeah, including the weird stuff.
Okay, let's start there then. This paradigm shift in physics. Glattfelder talks about skepticism towards physicalism. What's emerging instead? What's gaining ground?
Well, one of the big things, and it's quite fascinating, is the idea of information.
Information as fundamental.
Potentially, yeah. The interview suggests it could be an ontological primitive, like a basic building block of reality, maybe even more fundamental than matter or energy.
Wow, okay, so concepts like, what was it, informational structural realism.
Right. Or pan-computationalism, the idea that the universe itself is fundamentally like a giant computation unfolding, different names for similar kinds of ideas, really.
And you mentioned idealism earlier. Glattfelder brings that up too.
He does. It's seeing a resurgence, which, if you think about it, is a pretty radical shift.
What does that mean in this context, idealism?
Well, broadly, it's the idea that consciousness, not matter, might be the fundamental ground of reality, or at least primary.
Okay, so the opposite of physicalism, in a way.
In many ways, yes. Glattfelder actually proposes his own version called syncretic idealism. We could definitely get into that later.
Right, but the main point for now is it's a serious departure from the physicalist view that's dominated science for, well, centuries.
Absolutely. It's a big conceptual shakeup.
Which leads us neatly to the famous hard problem of consciousness.
Ah, yes, Chalmers' term.
Glattfelder talks about his own journey, being surprised that physics didn't engage more with philosophy on this.
Yeah, he found that disconnect interesting. He mentions, I think, a quote attributed to Feynman.
Oh, the one about ornithology for birds.
That's the one, comparing philosophy of science to ornithology for birds, basically saying it's irrelevant to the actual practice of physics.
Which highlights that gap, right? Some physicists seeing philosophy as detached.
Exactly. Detached from the real work, the experiments, the math. Glattfelder seemed to find that marginalization quite telling.
Especially given the huge questions physics itself raises.
Precisely. And he points out how late, relatively speaking, academic philosophy in the West really started focusing on consciousness, like around 1994 with the hard problem formulation.
He even found a quote from '89 suggesting nothing relevant had been written about it.
Yeah, which is pretty startling when you contrast it with, well, pretty much every other culture and historical period. Consciousness has been central in many traditions for millennia.
Right, which brings us to shamanism, mysticism, meditation. Glattfelder sees wisdom there.
Definitely. He argues these traditions have been directly engaging with consciousness for ages, shamanism going back maybe tens of thousands of years.
Wow.
They clearly distinguish between the physical world and, well, non-physical realms. And consciousness was the key, the access point.
Using things like psychedelics, trance drumming.
To induce altered states, specifically to explore these other levels of reality as they saw it.
And the mystics, Sufis, Kabbalists.
Similar focus, but often framed differently. Emphasis on direct, personal experience of the divine or ultimate reality, achieved through cultivating consciousness, not just following external rules or dogma.
So inward-looking, experiential.
Exactly, compared to systems based on external authority.
And meditative traditions, like from the Vedas, Upanishads.
Again, centered on working with consciousness, training the mind, focusing attention, aiming to experience something larger, non-physical, through direct inner work. A kind of first-person science of the mind, you could say.
This connects to what Glattfelder says about the current psychedelic renaissance, doesn't it?
It really does. There's this growing destigmatization, right? Psychedelics are being taken seriously again for mental health.
Wait, the clinical trial.
But also in philosophy of mind. There's literally a field now called philosophy of psychedelics.
He mentions a philosopher comparing studying the mind without psychedelics to a pianist without a piano.
Yeah, implying they might reveal aspects of mind you just can't access otherwise, like essential tools for investigation.
So the million-dollar question, are these experiences just brain noise or actual insights?
Well, that's the core debate, isn't it? Glattfelder suggests these experiences, these other realms people report, might actually align with what shamans, mystics, meditators have been describing forever.
Is there a common theme in those descriptions?
Often, yes. A recurring idea seems to be some kind of underlying structuring intelligence or a fundamental consciousness permeating reality.
He even brings in William James and his nitrous oxide trips.
Right. James's radical empiricism. His whole point was that all experience, however weird, is data. It's real as experience and potentially tells us something important about reality or consciousness.
Even if it seems bizarre or nonsensical from our normal viewpoint.
Especially then, maybe. James thought those states could offer glimpses beyond the veil of ordinary awareness.
Okay, so Glattfelder seems really interested in bridging the gap between the noumenal, the thing in itself, reality as it is,
and the phenomenal, the world as we experience it, that classic Kantian distinction.
How does he think we can bridge that, if Kant thought we were kind of stuck in the phenomenal?
Well, Glattfelder suggests part of the problem might be our cognitive bias, our belief that rational, logical thinking is the only way to get knowledge.
And some experiences just defy that. Like he mentions DMT experiences.
Exactly. Things like encountering complexities or non-dual states, ego death. These experiences often resist neat, rational explanation.
He also hints that really getting idealism might require more than just intellectual understanding.
Yeah, even with solid philosophical arguments, he seems to think direct experience might be needed to truly grasp it on a deeper level.
He brings up things like symbolic cognition, Jung's synchronicity.
Right. Examples of meaning or connection that seem to go beyond pure randomness, suggesting a deeper order that physicalism struggles with. And this idea of a will to complexity in the universe. It seems hard to square with just random physical processes, too.
He contrasts Kant and Schopenhauer on this access question.
Right. Kant basically saying we're trapped in phenomena limited by our mind's structure. Schopenhauer, though, perhaps influenced by Eastern thought, suggested we can access the transcendent, the underlying will, maybe through introspection or non-ordinary states.
So Schopenhauer offered a potential doorway that Kant didn't.
In a sense, yes. And Glattfelder implies psychedelic experiences might provide evidence for that Schopenhauerian view, or at least challenge the strict Kantian limits.
Because people often report these states feel more real than normal life.
Exactly. That feeling of being more real or like coming home. It echoes mystical accounts and directly challenges the idea that ordinary waking consciousness is the only or even the most accurate view of reality.
Glattfelder talks about a kind of Western detachment from this transcendence, and maybe needing strong medicine like psychedelics to reconnect.
Yeah, his argument seems to be that Western culture, with its focus on individualism and physicalism, had sort of cordoned off that innate sense of connection to something larger.
While meditation can get you there, it takes a lot of work.
A lot of work. So he suggests maybe these powerful psychedelic catalysts are needed for some people in our culture to kind of jolt them back into that awareness.
But he stresses integration, right? It's not just about the trip.
Critically important. He warns against the disconnect. You can have this profound experience of unity, he says, but if you don't integrate it, you might still act selfishly in daily life. The insights need to translate into behavior.
Which links to his point about losing our sense of interconnection.
Right. This hyper-individualism, he argues, makes us forget we're part of this larger matrix of life and consciousness.
And that has consequences. Ecocide, cruelty to animals.
He suggests it might contribute. If you feel fundamentally separate, maybe empathy diminishes. Though he does acknowledge the expanding circle of compassion we see now, thinking about octopus consciousness, even plant personhood. So maybe that's shifting.
So could idealism, this different worldview, lead to a better world? It's a tempting thought.
It is tempting, but he's cautious. He notes correctly that past idealist cultures weren't exactly paragons of virtue. Cruelty still happened.
So it's not a simple fix.
No. He prefers this idea of scientific spirituality, grounded in science, consensus reality, but open to working with consciousness, exploring inner states.
Contrasting that with cosmic nihilism or rigid dogmatic religions.
Yeah, seeing both of those as maybe disillusioned in different ways. He suggests that inner happiness, like the Eastern traditions teach, rather than just chasing external stuff, might lead to better outcomes, less destruction.
He also critiques how physicalism became dominant, sort of under the rug.
Yeah, his point is it wasn't necessarily adopted after intense critical debate. It just kind of happened post-Descartes.
Right.
Became the default assumption.
He mentions that Michelson quote about physics being nearly complete, right before relativity and quantum mechanics blew everything up.
Right, likely misattributed. But the sentiment illustrates the danger of assuming you've got it all figured out. He puts naive physicalism and maybe naive theism in a similar boat, potentially limited compared to a more accurate metaphysics.
Now, shifting gears slightly within science, metaphysics in quantum mechanics versus complexity science. He sees a difference.
A big one. He says the quantum pioneers were deeply engaged with metaphysics. Bohr, Heisenberg, Schrödinger, they grappled with the weirdness, observer effects, wave function collapse.
But then came the shut up and calculate phase.
Exactly. Philosophical questions got pushed aside in physics, even though we still don't have one agreed upon interpretation of quantum mechanics. It's kind of bizarre.
Whereas complexity science?
It was different from the start. Because it deals with emergence, how wholes become more than the sum of their parts, it inherently bumps up against metaphysical questions about interconnectedness, levels of reality, structural realism.
He mentions figures like von Gleisersfeld, von Forster.
Yeah, pioneers in cybernetics, constructivism, they really emphasize the observer's role in constructing reality. That philosophical underpinning was baked into complexity science much more than in mainstream physics, perhaps.
And this idea of emergence, strong versus weak emergence.
Right. Weak emergence is when complex patterns arise. But you can basically predict them from the lower level rules. Think flocking birds. Strong emergence is where genuinely new properties appear, things you couldn't predict just from the parts. Consciousness arising from neurons is often the go-to example, though it's debated.
He brings in Stephen Wolfram here. Computation.
Yeah, Wolfram's work with cellular automata, like the game of life, shows how incredibly complex, seemingly unpredictable behavior can emerge from extremely simple rules applied repeatedly.
It's kind of amazing, complexity from simplicity.
It really is. It connects to Wigner's unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics, too. Why should math describe the universe so well? Maybe because reality itself has this computational rule-based structure at some level?
So the computational paradigm is key in complexity science.
Very much so. Using networks, simulations, tools to understand systems where simple equations just don't work because everything's interacting with everything else.
And pan-computationalism extends this idea to life itself.
Right. Moving beyond just the primordial soup idea to seeing life as maybe a more universal phenomenon, something that happens naturally where you have energy gradients, non-equilibrium thermodynamics.
Dissipative structures. Entropy production, fueling complexity, like Prigogine or Jeremy England's work.
Exactly, those kinds of ideas. But Glattfelder cautions against taking computation too literally, like the universe is a giant silicon chip. It's likely a more abstract principle.
Back to that will to complexity. A sapient cosmos, but maybe not sentient everywhere.
Yeah, intelligence or information processing potential being inherent, even if it doesn't always manifest as conscious awareness like ours.
Okay, let's circle back to Glattfelder's own proposal. Syncretic idealism. Can you unpack that?
So the core idea is a base reality of cosmic consciousness. That's the ultimate source.
And physical reality emerges from that.
Yes, potentially with information acting as the crucial intermediary, like bridging the gap between abstract consciousness and the physical world we see.
He uses the analogy of qubits, potentiality becoming actuality.
Something like that. And in this view, our brains don't create consciousness. They channel it, filter it.
Like radios tuning into a broadcast.
A common analogy, yeah. The brain allows this cosmic consciousness to manifest in an individualized way. The cosmos becomes sapient through complex structures like brains assembling.
He mentions Bernardo Kastrup's idea of dissociation.
Right, that individual minds might be like dissociated alters of this universal consciousness. It's an intriguing model. And he even wonders if AI, if complex enough, could also channel consciousness.
Wow. That opens up a whole can of worms.
Doesn't it just?
He also discusses John Wheeler's it from bit idea, information as fundamental.
Yeah, Wheeler's famous phrase, the idea that physical reality arises from informational processes, from yes-no questions, essentially.
But Glattfelder credits someone else too, von Weizsäcker.
Friedrich von Weizsäcker, yes. A German physicist and philosopher who apparently proposed similar information-theoretic ideas even earlier, but his work wasn't as widely known in the English-speaking world.
And Wheeler also talked about a participatory universe.
Right. That we're not just passive observers. Consciousness, through observation, plays a role in co-creating reality. It's a radical idea.
And more recently, quantum information theory is focusing on observers too. Renner, Bruckner.
Yes, there's a definite trend in quantum foundations towards information-based and observer-centric approaches. Glattfelder sees this as positive, a move away from strict physicalism.
But he thinks they could go further with the metaphysics.
He seems to suggest that, yeah, maybe engage more explicitly with the philosophical implications. He speculates they might be hesitant to use the word idealism because of historical baggage, like associations with solipsism, the idea that only one's own mind is sure to exist.
Which ties into the problem of other minds. How do we know anyone else is conscious?
The classic philosophical puzzle. And Glattfelder throws in the neuroscience idea that even our normal waking state is a kind of controlled hallucination.
Our brain constructing reality.
Right. And Don Hoffman's idea that we're locked in consciousness, that physical reality is just an interface, not the underlying truth.
It really underscores why these philosophical discussions are so necessary, doesn't it? Grappling with what reality is.
Fundamentally, yeah.
Glattfelder shares some personal stuff, too, about his own psychedelic use.
He does. He talks about trying LSD at 17, which sounds like it was initially quite rough, led to panic attacks for a couple of years.
That sounds intense, but ultimately transformative.
He says it shifted his whole life trajectory, opened him up to new perspectives despite the initial difficulty, which is a good reminder of the potential power and risks involved.
He also mentions using THC therapeutically.
Yeah, for maintaining perspective, humor, in what he sees as a troubled world. And he notes how views are changing, like THC being legal in parts of Switzerland now. Shows a broader shift in thinking about these states.
This leads him to empirical mysticism. What's that about? Discovering laws in non-ordinary states.
Kind of, yeah. The idea is that if these experiences, like those induced by psychedelics, are reproducible and structured, maybe we can empirically study them, find underlying patterns or even laws governing those states beyond just rational understanding.
He mentions the Johns Hopkins studies.
Right, where psychedelics reliably induced mystical-type experiences ranked as incredibly meaningful by participants. That suggests there's something consistent happening there, not just random brain activity.
He brings in the concept of Leela, too, divine play.
Yeah, from the Vedas. This idea of the universe, or the self, playing hide and seek with itself, creating fragmentation, experience, even suffering as part of this cosmic game. It's one framework for trying to make sense of it all.
He argues our basic beliefs, even seemingly rational ones, are ultimately irrational.
That our foundational assumptions about reality rest on something non-rational, and these beliefs then shape everything. And he connects this to postmodernism's acceptance of multiple valid interfaces with reality, contrasting it with science, sometimes claiming the only valid one.
He uses entanglement and superdeterminism as examples of multiple viewpoints.
Right. Entanglement can look like spooky holistic connection, or maybe it's all predetermined, superdeterminism. Both might be valid descriptions from different angles, highlighting the observer's role and our limited view.
Then he tackles the hardcore physicalists trying to explain consciousness away.
Yeah, the attempts to say it's an illusion, like Dennett argues.
Or epiphenomenal, just a byproduct with no causal power.
Or just doesn't exist at all, illuminativism. Which, as Glattfelder points out, is pretty ironic. You have supposedly rational scientists defending positions that totally contradict almost everyone's direct experience of being conscious and making choices.
It shows how strong belief systems can be, right? Dogmatism.
Absolutely. He mentions Planck's observation about science advancing one funeral at a time, how hard it is to change deeply ingrained paradigms. Maybe psychedelics or mindfulness help loosen that rigidity.
He really stresses being accurate, though. An analytic approach to both physical and transcendental.
Yeah, he values clarity and trying to be right, even about things that are hard to grasp, so we can know when we're wrong. He contrasts that with maybe vaguer religious narratives. Science and spirituality for critical thinking. He gives the sobering example of spiritual Nazis to show why critical analysis matters.
What about collective intelligence? He brings that up too.
Yeah, the idea that maybe no single theory will crack it. We need collective wisdom, synthesizing different perspectives. He finds it paradoxical how individually smart humans can be, yet collectively.
Well, we make some questionable choices.
Understatement of the year. He wonders if flawed metaphysics is part of the root cause of our collective problems. But he hopes our abstract thinking can eventually lead to collective wisdom.
He revisits the physics versus complexity science methods again, analytical versus computational.
Right. Physics often tries to boil reality down to equations. Great for fundamentals, less so for super messy interconnected systems.
Like the three-body problem.
Exactly. Complexity science often uses computation mapping systems onto networks, simulating them.
Yeah.
Better for systems where equations get impossibly hard.
He also mentions time being a huge headache for physics.
Oh yeah. Relativity, quantum mechanics, the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, seemingly erasing time. It's a conceptual minefield. Computational models often just use simple, discrete time steps, which is more intuitive but maybe less fundamental.
And these new ideas about space-time emerging from quantum entanglement, EPR.
Exactly. Suggesting space and time aren't the bedrock, but emerge from something deeper, like entangled quantum information. Still very speculative, but points to how fundamental our picture might be changing.
And Wolfram's rulal space comes up again here, connected to consciousness.
Yeah, Wolfram's idea of this abstract space of all possible rules, and maybe consciousness, is related to how we traverse or sample that space. It's interesting seeing Wolfram, initially skeptical of philosophy, engaging with these deeper questions now.
It all comes back to synthesis, doesn't it? Bringing these different threads together.
That seems to be Glattfelder's core message. We need insights from science, philosophy, shamanism, mysticism, weave them together for a coherent picture. He mentions Dennett's critique that idealism lacks a single, unified theory. Maybe synthesis is the answer to that.
He also emphasizes emergence in biology again, how mind-blowing it is.
It really is. Ontogeny, how a complex organism develops from one cell, the sheer complexity inside a single cell, the microbiome, all emerging from simpler rules and interactions.
He thinks we might be underappreciating it, conditioned thinking.
Possibly. We see it happen, so we take it for granted. But the level of intricate organization emerging from simple beginnings is staggering. Photosynthesis, being almost 100% efficient nature, finds these incredible hacks. Maybe a better metaphysics helps us grasp this complexity better.
What about math and DMT? He connects those.
Yeah, back to the unreasonable effectiveness of math. Syncretic idealism might explain it if math structures are somehow inherent in the cosmic consciousness we all partake in. And then these anecdotal reports of people encountering complex math or geometry on DMT.
Are they discovering something already there in consciousness?
That's the wild question, isn't it?
It feels like a call to bridge the physicist and the shaman in a way.
Combine the rigor and the experiential insight. That seems to be the direction he's pointing.
He specifically highlights Christopher Bosch's work. 73 high-dose LSD trips.
Yeah, an incredible undertaking by a philosopher over 20 years. Glattfelder presents it as serious, systematic research into these realms.
He mentions Ervin Laszlo thought Bosch's book was really important.
Extremely important, yeah. Pointing to themes like underlying intelligence, purpose, and the accessibility of these deeper realities through such methods.
What did Bosch encounter in these states? Bliss and suffering.
Both. Intensely. He describes profound bliss, the beloved diamond luminosity, but also a deep sea of suffering. And crucially, he felt it was orchestrated, purposeful.
A cleansing phase of suffering, then bliss and insight.
That was a recurring pattern. Experiencing vast collective suffering, seemingly processing it, then moving into unity states and metaphysical understanding.
He eventually stopped, found it hard to come back.
Apparently so. The pull of that unity and love was immense, making ordinary reality difficult. It raises this profound idea. Maybe the universe's purpose is this incarnation of transcendence into matter, and suffering is somehow part of that process.
The price of self-knowing, as Glattfelder puts it.
A heavy thought.
So, to wrap up, Glattfelder sees math and physics as comforting, but also a tease.
Yeah, like they give us a framework, a sense of control, but ultimately lead us to deeper mysteries. Nature reveals just enough to keep us hooked, always opening more questions.
It's a feeling of perpetual discovery, maybe.
Exactly. Never quite reaching the final answer, but the journey itself being incredibly revealing.
Well, this has been quite the journey itself. Thanks for diving deep into Glattfelder's ideas with us. We've covered a lot: the shift from physicalism, the return of idealism, non-ordinary states, the quest for meaning.
It really ties together a lot of threads. And it leaves us with that big question, doesn't it? If our current tools, scientific and philosophical, have limits, and these other experiences reported across cultures are so profound, what new ways of knowing might be out there?
Right. How does our inner experience relate to the cosmos? It's something to really mull over.
How might these ideas change how you see consciousness, reality, your own place in it all?
Definitely food for thought. As always, this deep dive is just a starting point. We encourage everyone listening to keep exploring these fascinating topics and the sources we discussed.